Hello, Charlie TCG here, and welcome to my deck profile for Fusion Mew. This deck absolutely took Japan Nationals by surprise and ended up dominating and winning the event. So let's break down exactly how Mew VMAX kind of get to this sort of place and kind of look into what its matchups could be in our new format. So in the City League, it got in about 7% of the top 8, so not too bad for a deck which has been around for nearly 2 years. And the large tournaments end up winning Japan Nationals and having one top 4 placement, and also a top 8 placement in other tournaments that happen in this sort of format. The ability lock is absolutely incredible what Mew VMAX kind of do with it, and it can deal a huge amount of damage. The likes of the Rise of Spiritomb and likes of Ting Lu were kind of going around that by having them go into the Fusion Strike energy sort of way around it and attaching to Genesis, you're still constantly getting that draw factor. Because at the end of the day, Mew VMAX and Genesis equals the best draw engine in the entirety of the game. So it's really nice to see that kind of go through. So what exactly does the winning list look like? So here we're kind of seeing why this list ended up winning. We have 4-3 line of Mew VMAX, always having a high count of Mew V, because that's the old Pokemon you always want to have in the active spot. Either start with, and you want to have as many of these out as early as possible. And Mew VMAX, you don't need to rely too much on having 4. You're only ever really going to have 2, maybe 3 attackers in there. So that's why you play 3 of them. Has the amazing cross Fusion Strike attack, which means you can copy any of your Fusion Strike Pokemon which are on the bench and use that as an attack and not needing that energy requirement. So I really like that with Mew VMAX. And that copies them mainly is in Genesect V, doing 210 damage, and he can't attack next turn. You can power this up with Power Tablet, Choice Belt, and even Cleansing Clubs, so those big one-hit KOs can do over 300 damage. And Genesect is really good with its draw sort of factor, where you get to draw any card until you have that many cards in hand of the Fusion Strike you have in play. If you have a full bench of 5 and 1 in the active, of course, you draw up TF6, which is very, very powerful. It does, in fact, open up to 2 other attackers. One copy of Meloetta, which is very, very good, which has 70 times the amount of Fusion Strike energy attached to your Pokemon in play. Doing 280 damage is very, very good for a single prizer. Or if it's on a Mew VMAX, that's also very, very powerful. And the likes of Power Tablet and Choice Belt, you can do those big one-hit KOs on anything. But a very interesting card in this list, which kind of is very intuitive, is Ice Cube Fusion Strike, with its amazing block slider, which does 40 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon for each Fusion Strike energy you have in play. Now that could do a whopping 160 damage, gain a KO on like a Squawk ability, EX, or even nearly gain a one-hit KO on a Lumineon. You could bring it to the active slot, play a Power Tablet, and boom, all of a sudden doing that big amount of damage, which is really cool with Ice Cube getting that big KO in that sort of way. So those are our attackers. Those are exactly why we play the list. Having these really cool, unique, and intricate attackers like Ice Cube and Meloetta can really help with its matchups. It does have some very interesting, very good sort of stable item cards. Power pads, we can reuse any of our disruptive cards like Iona, Judge, Boss, and even potentially Elixir Sparkle if one of your cards is prized and you've got hand disruptive. 2 copies of Lost Vacuum, because Partial Peak still is very devastating to this list, and a lot of Mew decks are still going to the turbo build. So it's good to have that disruptive and immediately removing any of that threats of that path in play. Do have some switching cards because unlike the way Genesect has quite a high retreat cost, and Mew VMAX can't attack next turn, so having the likes of 2 copies of Switching Card and 2 copies of Skate Rope is really good. And Switch Card gets that extra little heal, which Genesect will really need in this, especially in your Lost Box matchups. The kind of like our search cards, we play 2 copies of Nest Ball and 4 copies of Ultra Ball. Nest Ball is good even though we have multiple different ways to get your basic Pokemon. It's good to have a high count of Ultra Ball to guarantee that extra search for that Mew VMAX, and that's exactly what we need to have. Because we also play 4 copies of Battle VIP Pass, which is our main sort of bench support, like filling out the board with basics as early on as possible. And 4 copies of Power Tablet, which is very, very powerful to deal 30 more damage for all the Fusion Strike attackers. We also have 4 copies of Cramomatic. This has kind of been there quite a while, being that flip card where if you discard a item card, you get to flip a coin, if head search check for any card and put it into your hand. Very, very good because this is like for a Steel Stone, but you have 4 of them, and obviously it's a 50-50 chance of it working. This can guarantee get the energy you might need, get the extra Power Tablet or the attacker or Mew VMAX you really desperately require. Support accounts, we play very thin amounts, but because of the amount of draw power Genesect V has to offer with us, that's why we're playing this bit lower. We play 1 copy of Iona and 1 copy of Judge. Having the disruptive capability of both disrupting very early by getting your opponent set to 4, or even the late game with Iona getting them down to 1, it's really, really good with Mew, because they never worry too much about, and you gain hand disruption because of Genesect V in play. So having these Ionas and Judge is very, very important. 2 copies of Boss's Orders, guaranteeing gain that switching effect of your opponent, gain that easy sort of KO on the bench is always really good, that 2 to 3 prizes. And 2 copies Elsa Sparkle, so you can attach those 3 Fusion Strike Energies turn 1 to that big KO with a Meloetta, which is very, very important. The Stadium Council is very interesting. 1 copy of Path to Peak and 2 copy of Lost City. Now, we saw a huge amount of Lost City out in play when Reggie's was very, very popular. So getting rid of 1 to 2 Reggie's, it's kind of how you end up winning those sort of matchups. But this is really good in the likes of Gardevoir, because sometimes they might only have 1 Zacian and 1 potentially of the single prize Gardevoir. Kind of removing that liability for them in play kind of can mean you can get those extra KOs on a lot of options. Getting rid of the potentially the biggest threat your opponent has to offer is really, really important. And that's why I like the high count of Lost City. And obviously Cleansing Gloves goes with the factor because you can get that 30 damage on Gardevoir EX, which is what this deck can really struggle with, than relying too much on playing power tablets, because Choice Belt doesn't work, but you still play a high count of Choice Belt because it's a lot more Vs, V-Stars, and VMAX is kind of running rampant, so that's why you play those Choice Belts. And 3 copies of Forest Steel Stone. You want to guarantee get your turn 1 attacks going, or turn 2 big sort of damage with Mew VMAX, and having 3 copies of Forest Steel Stone is a way for you not to kind of get used to it, and it's a way to fuel any of your Lost Zone in there with having the likes of Lost Vacuum, and easy to get rid of them with the likes of Lost Vacuum to get rid of Path to Peak in the late sort of game. And the state and the energy cards we do play, we play 4 copies of Forest Stone, Fusion Strike Energy, which is very, very powerful, and 3 copies of Double Turbo to kind of get those KOs with Mew. So why is Fusion Strike kind of having that big popularity? Well, it's because of Tinglu and Spiritomb. These 2 cards here really stop any abilities being in play. But when you attach a Fusion Strike Energy to the likes of Genesect and V, it ignores every single effect of abilities affecting it from your opponent's side. Back then, it was mainly like the likes of Zigzagoon for the pings, but now it's stopping the likes of Spiritomb, which means it immediately Genesect has its ability back again, and similar ways like Tinglu. So this is good to constantly still drawing and not worry too much about these ability lock decks, which are kind of running rampant. So because of that, your matchups kind of become very positive. You have a pretty good Mew, Arceus, and Giratina, and the rest of those big powerful EX cards like Xianpao, Miraidon, and Gardevoir EX. These are ones which I would say you really have a good focus on because you can get those big one-hit KOs, and some of them quite struggle to get the KO. The likes of Gardevoir EX, you have to burn a load of their resources quite early in the game so they can get those big KOs with either Zacian Vs or the likes of Gardevoir. Because in the early game, you might have to get those KOs with Zacian V before they move on to have the reversal energies from their baby Gardevoirs. Miraidon is kind of falling away from the Regieleki VMAX and kind of favoring more the Raichu. So again, they have to use a lot more resources to get the big one-hit KOs. And Arceus, Xianpao, and Lugia kind of can take a bit of a while. They can chip at you, and anything Mew goes to chip of it, you immediately copy baby Mew V's attack and shuffle it back into your deck. Kind of its negatives are definitely are the Lost Box of decks. These are the ones which are kind of carrying around and Drapion and can get the one-hit KO with the likes of Giratina. The reason why I say it's 50-50, even though Mew did end up winning that sort of the game, I would say it can kind of struggle because they are going to add the likes of Spiritomb. They do have Giratina V-Star, which can get a big one-hit KO on Mew VMAX, and then kind of getting those KOs on the Genesect on the bench is very, very scary because of the likes of Kyogre. You're not playing Manaphy, which you could potentially play, and if you are scared of that, definitely go with that Manaphy sort of play. But Lost Box with the Kyogre build is definitely one of your biggest weakness because they can play Galarian Moltres and also the likes of Kyogre, so they can kind of deal with Mew VMAX with your Galarian Moltres while setting up and powering up a Kyogre, getting that ready to get those 2 KOs on the bench with of the Genesect. So that's why I would say Lost Box is a bit negative. Yes, Mew did end up winning that sort of those matchups overall, but I would say it's more of the 50-50 with Giratina. So where would I put Mew sort of placement? Like I would say like it was when I did the where I ranked it in competitive, I did put it in number 4 sort of spot because it's doing pretty well overall. And I would probably still say it's maybe the 4, maybe the 5th place. I wouldn't say it's going to go any higher in this, but it should be more on your radar. Because it's so in Japan, the top players are definitely going to look into this and kind of seen how it could evolve. And if we're doing Worlds in Japan in that exact same format, This is something to really consider about if you're testing for Worlds. If you want to understand exactly what's going to happen for World, you should really understand how Mew VMAX is going to play. This deck is nowhere near going to die. It never gets KO'd, and despite how many of these encounters they're throwing their way, Mew always bounces back and even harder. Now they're going back to more Fusion Strike build, which I quite like a lot of it. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this little breakdown to know exactly how this winning list in Japan National sort of focuses on, and exactly some of its matchup wise. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to like and subscribe, and comment down below, will you be trying Mew VMAX now? Do you think Mew is in a very good spot? And if you kind of disagree with any of my points, let me know in the comments below. My Chai TCG, I'm going to break down more of the top sort of lists, which I'm going to be showcasing in the next couple of weeks or so, and I will see you guys then. Bye for now.